Um, Obviously, I do work for the government. I have at least one colleague in the audience who's carefully monitoring what I say. So this is purely a personal representation. It's a very interesting topic for us. Obviously, NZTA has quite significant holdings in terms of data and roadside assets as well. So cyber breach detection, to me, I'm very keen to know more about it. So I've done quite a bit of digging into the products and services and stuff. We do have a dedicated SOC manager based down in Wellington. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but we'll give it a go. So we're going to dig into some questions I've shared with the gentleman via email previously. We'll try and work through the questions, conscious of time as well and not getting pinged off, but we'll see how we go.
Go with the bat.
So first of all, maybe if we could take the chance to sort of do introductions. I guess, Tony, if we start with you, if you want to talk a little bit, you've had a good chance already, but about yourself and then also the products and services that you're offering.
So yeah, I work for Reset. I didn't get to product because that wasn't the idea of my presentation. But we're an endpoint security company. We've been around for 30 years. We have EDR and we have endpoint security. So both at the enterprise all the way down through to consumer. Welcome to have a conversation about that during one of the breaks with anybody that would like to.
Yeah, hi, Glenn Maloney, our Regional Sales Manager, based over in Sydney, but we're working obviously closely with Chilisoft. We're new to the market over here. We're a network detection and response platform, sit passively within the environment, providing real-time insights into security and performance of end users' environments.
Hi guys, I'm Simon Howe. I'm with Logarithm. Been with Logarithm about 6 years. I'm now the VP for sales for our APAC business based out of Sydney, here on a regular basis, I'm pleased to say. Think of Logarithm, you've know us as a SIEM, potentially next-gen SIEM platform, but think of us as the technology that powers the SOC. End-to-end, we're covering the log management, the full spectrum analytics, the SIEM, the UABA, the NDR, everything required to manage that SOC capability.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm the Chief Risk Officer for Transaction Services Group. I'm unique here. I'm not actually a vendor. I'm not selling you anything, but I'm a consumer of these services. I work for a New Zealand-based company. We started off a long time ago in 1994, but today we have about close to 1,200 people around the world. A nice little successful Kiwi story. One of the challenges I have is actually being accountable for security as a function across a very fragmented group of companies that don't interact a lot with each other on a day-to-day basis.
Hi everyone, I'm Bakshish. I am the Global Product Manager for Tripwire. Tripwire is a compliance, vulnerability management, industrial cybersecurity company. And we serve a whole range of clients from governments to private enterprises worldwide.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I guess what interests me when you look into this field in terms of breach detection, we've had John Duffy from the Privacy Commissioner talk about the looming legislation, maybe not so looming, but the need to actually identify breaches to tackle harm. Obviously, we're all interested in harm reduction. I'm going to go a little bit left field on this one. Kevin and I swapped emails about this. From my perspective, we have security teams, you and I, in that services model, centrally looking into vast reams of data. So stuff in the cloud, stuff on-prem. What interested me a couple of weeks ago, there was a report out from the UK about CISO burnout. I don't know if anyone saw that one. It was a really interesting report. It talked about the fact that the average life expectancy for a CISO was about 2 years. If you've made it to 2 years, you were doing very, very, very well. For a CIO, it was about 4.5. And what fascinated me was we always talk about a shortage of talent, a global shortage of talent. So if we're seeing people burn out, even at CISO level through to SOC analyst, what Kevin, if you want to go first, what's your kind of recommendations for avoiding that burnout?
Well, one of the challenges we've had is to keep people with us in such a high pressure environment. And we're an Auckland-based company. We operate globally, but our regional centre is here in Auckland. And New Zealand's a small place. It's very difficult to find people very quickly. So one of the things I've moved to doing is instead of hiring an Auckland-centric team, we're all using tools that allow us to operate remotely. So we're currently looking to recruit another position in our application security team. At the moment, we're interviewing people who are based in Invercargill, in Dunedin, and Christchurch. with no expectation that they would ever move to Auckland to work as part of my team. There would just be a remote connection. And obviously then that in itself brings challenges in terms of making sure people are part of a team. But I think without having that option, we're only going to be looking at a very small pool of people. And that's going to cause me issues myself.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's interesting because we have operations in 3 cities, security operations. So when you mentioned that, I think you have to have the tools set up and the SOC capability configured, the processes and responses in place, so that all members of the team know what they're doing.
Yeah, we also act as a lights out center for Europe. So when Europe is asleep, it's my guys who are looking after breach detection or escalation. So there's a lot on their plate.
Actually, from your perspective, the company you're representing, is there recommendations that you see around, avoiding that analyst burnout?
So, we recognized that early on, that was happening. Since we have worldwide operations, that's a growing trend. So there's not enough talent for cybersecurity globally. So we started managed services. So we as a vendor also are a managed service provider. So we have our own SOC as well. So we have a product called Expert Ops. That's exactly what it does, is managed services for compliances and vulnerability management and file integrity monitoring. And soon we're launching same thing for the industrial cybersecurity sector.
Fantastic. Thank you. Simon, from your perspective, obviously the product set is covering all kinds of the visibility triad, that concept of getting in there. What's your kind of view on this?
Well, this is, I think this is a global problem, that lack of cybersecurity expertise. Again, all the focus of the effort, if you like, is on, minimal staff, minimal resources. So the risk is high that the precious analysts that you have, the precious few analysts you have, are going to be, burnt out. Key to this, of course, is the noise, that swivel chair insanity, trying to manage multiple technologies, multiple platforms, alarm fatigue, too much noise. So from our perspective, what we see is driving more automation and orchestration into the technology. If we can drive more of that noise out, have that handled within the technology, then you've got your analysts more focused on, the more critical events that require the context, right? So that piece is fundamental. Get the noise out. It's actually one of our customers in Melbourne. It's Kmart. They won't be here, so I'll mention the name. But large retail outlet. The way they described it, so I'll quote, is automate away the mundane. If you can get out the mundane tasks, some of that noise, you leave your precious, highly paid analysts to work on the more context-driven stuff.
Thank you. Glenn, from your perspective, is there observations that you've seen around avoiding that fatigue piece?
Yeah, I think it's really important for organisations to embrace automation, cloud technology and machine learning. Really jump in and sort of work with those platforms. The integration piece as well. So we talked a little bit about the SOC visibility triad. So having a good network detection response, a good SIEM solution, and a good EDR solution, and having all those working together, automated. Is certainly going to allow them to get on top of things.
Tony, from your perspective,
well, as you know, there's somewhat of a different view. We should all celebrate there's a shortage, by the way, because it means we all get paid more. So we don't want too many people, do we? Anyway, but that aside, I mean, it brings the importance of actually we should be training more people in universities. We should be making cybersecurity cooler, because this is a room of geeky people that. If you go and stand in a bar and say I'm in cybersecurity, somebody might go, "Oh, that's really cool," and move up the bar. Yeah, you're not the interesting person to talk to unless you've got some interesting stories. So I'm just saying we need to make it slightly more normal. But automation is the key. It's not just it's not just automating and being able to get rid of the mundane. It's being able to automate the response to the mundane. So you don't actually need to care about it, and then understanding what is critical and what really does need to be looked at. And then having the ability to lean back on some form of expert outside of your organisation that can assist. Because realistically, you want a global organisation behind you that has actually seen some of these threats and seen some of these incidents before. You're probably looking at something that somebody else has probably already been through. I very much doubt you're the first. So have that in the back pocket as well.
That's great.
Could I just add, just on that point about sharing, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with MITRE ATT&CK and that framework, but increasingly this is being recognised as, real examples, real scenarios, and for any organisation, an excellent way of understanding the techniques and the tactics and if you like, from that information sharing point of view, a really good framework.
Well, as I say, I'll second that because we bring in the MITRE attack information into our systems.
Yeah.
I just want to mention something on automation. So it's what we've discovered. Automation doesn't work with every industry. There are people who just don't want to have the auto remediation on, or don't want to patches to be automatic because they don't know or they don't understand the impact of it. So I think we're slowly moving towards automation, but it's not widely applicable in all industries. That's what we've discovered. So that's the reason that drove us to have a managed service, because Tripwire is well known for its cybersecurity expertise, and so that just automatically made it easier for us to sell those services and provide clients with a better cybersecurity posture.
Sounds great. And Kevin, in terms of what you're covering day to day, are you using all of the technology to the fullest extent, do you think?
Not completely. We're a logarithm user. We've been using logarithm for about 2.5 years now. So we began that journey. We're still on that journey in terms of trying to improve our automation. We often have interesting conversations with our IT partners when it comes to orchestration, because no one likes us touching their equipment automatically when we see things. But it's an interesting kind of move where we need to get better and faster. One of the challenges I have, as I mentioned, we cover Europe when they're lights out. So we need to be able to take action on remote devices in businesses where my people don't necessarily know a lot about what's going on. Hence some of the barriers to kind of the automation in that space. But we're trying to kind of improve things as we go along.
That's great. Thank you. I think when Alex was running through the slides originally, you got to the end, Alex, with the dwell times. And I think from my experience doing some GDPR work, Tony, a few years ago in preparation for that, there was a real sense of urgency around detection and then being able to contain and respond, and know that you could, actually notify a regulator and potentially notify customers as well, have that quick response. Now, Alex had some figures around dwell time for Asia Pacific. I don't know if anybody saw those, but it shocked me. So I pulled out some numbers from a while back, obviously from 2017, which was 18 months. That's the average in this region in terms of detecting a breach. And I think, Alex, you had the number...
1,000 days.
1,000 days, which by my working is over 3 years. I mean, if we're looking at that kind of level of sort of failure to see the chicken, the fox in the coop, basically, I guess my question to you guys is, are there incidents that you've seen? Are there stories that you can tell about? Potentially not, but are there lessons to be learned about ways that we can speed up that detection and response?
Well, can I just go first here? And I'm not going to share any specific example, but how many people in this room actually store data beyond 90 days? How many of you store it over a year? Wow, I'm actually really impressed, because this is one of the biggest issues I think I've seen when you talk to anybody about security analytics. If you try and store all your data over a year, that's huge. You're into storing everything that happens on your network in your company. Think of also actually the value of the data that you're storing. Where are you storing it? Is it secure? Yeah. So I'm just pointing out that actually I think one of the biggest challenges this industry faces is storage of that security analytic data. So if you've got to roll that back to, I think it was 417 days, wasn't it, on the slide that you had?
That was 2017.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But allowing that good number of, storing that data and analysing that data to get the actual story and find out where the incident first happened, I think it's really, really challenging for the whole industry.
Yeah. See, compliance-driven enterprises, they store the data for 13 to 18 months. Private sector enterprises generally tend not to store data if they have no compliance requirement. So what he mentions is a very important point. If more companies were storing data, the forensics become a lot easier.
Yes.
So it's a valid point.
I mean, the figures are frightening, and I think it's important to put them in context as well. I think, as organisations, we are thinking more about security. We are putting more practices in place. We are getting better to the degree that we're understanding the problem better, I think. Technology is getting better too. You know, from a technology point of view, we're leveraging AI, machine learning, obviously. We're leveraging ever increasingly advanced security analytics to help us in this area. Pervasive visibility is really something that you're after. You're looking for a platform that will give you that pervasive visibility and surface your critical events and incidents quickly. Reducing that overall time to detect and time to respond window overall is really what we're after to reduce the risk.
You know, another thing in dwell times is it's behavior. We are so focused on critical assets, and as this gentleman, I forget his name, mentioned that it's the equipment that you don't pay attention to. That's where it starts. So we are trained to focus on critical assets, then prioritize, then reduce the noise. But we're totally eliminating all the endpoints and points of entry. Now, with convergence with the OT side, that's another point where the attackers are finding their way in. So I think we have to change that behavior, and we'll see that dwell time shorten if you can catch early on.
Yeah, I think from an extra op point of view, I mean, there's been EDR solutions and network perimeter solutions that have obviously been around for many years, but organisations are still getting breached. So the area that extra op plays is an emerging market, the NDR space, and we really focus on that sort of east-west corridor. The north-south has obviously been taken care of, but yeah, we're focusing on that east-west to help reduce dwell times.
Kevin, any input from you on that?
I think the lessons I've learned is there's no one solution, right? We've got a SIEM, it's expanded in scope, it's covering a lot of stuff. We suck up a lot of information. My analysts have to, even with a high quality kind of correlation and filtration that this product does, they're still dealing with a lot of alarms. We have a multitude of layers that we introduce to protect our people and our information. I mean, it starts off at very simple things like universal two-factor, right? All of our employees are forced to use two-factor if they're ever outside of our network. And most of the attempted breaches we've seen have been around phishing attacks that try and harvest credentials. If I can protect the credentials by requiring a second factor, I immediately lower my stress levels in that regard. We've got internal honeypots strung around our organization in various parts of our network, especially in areas that are harder to reach and areas we don't necessarily see a lot of. And I think doing that, and also strict segmentation, I mean, we're a level 1 PCI certified business because we handle payments. So we have a strong need to ensure that systems are not encroaching on what I call the cardholder data network, where I don't want anything extraneous to be in. By doing those things, which are considered to be hygiene factors as opposed to kind of advanced level security, I've made it a lot easier to then focus on the threat hunting that we do, because the scope of it is much more reduced.
Yeah. That's great. What interests me, I guess, from my perspective, we spend a lot of time at work lately looking at cloud. So we have a multi-cloud hybrid model with data and assets sitting in all kinds of locations, predominantly in Australia. For you guys, I mean, with that kind of move away from the perimeter model, with data centres predominantly being offshored from the New Zealand context over to Australia, are there things that you can see in terms of having visibility over all your cloud assets that you think need to be flagged and prioritised? What are the takeaways for there?
So to me, I'll kick off. Yeah, there isn't a conversation we're having today that doesn't involve cloud in some aspect or another, whether that's increasingly just cloud-first strategies, everything in the cloud, cloud delivery in terms of SaaS and PaaS platforms. It's now very much a part. If we're looking at security across an environment, it's almost certainly a hybrid of on-prem, hosted, and cloud-based platforms. And anything you're doing around security needs to encompass all of that. So, when we talk about visibility, it's not just seeing on-prem and hoping the cloud's secure, it's ensuring that that's part of the overall picture. So, for example, within Logarithm, from a technology point of view, all of that unstructured JSON-type format we're getting out of, CloudTrail and AWS and Azure and Office 365 is all critical feed now into that overall SIEM and that overall picture. As a general theme, cloud is an essential part of every discussion today.
Anybody else with a view on that cloud world?
Yeah, I think from an extra point of view, we're working really closely with the main cloud providers, so GCP, Azure, AWS. All of these platforms have recently released a way of sharing the traffic with vendors like Extra Logarithm. So for AWS point of view, it's the VPC traffic mirroring. Typically, the clouds are always seen as sort of a blind spot for organisations. So, the cloud platforms have listened to the security vendors and worked with us to be able to reduce those blind spots.
Actually, anything?
I mean, we have products that do that. So, along with our Tripwire Enterprise, we've got add-ons that monitor the configuration of your cloud assets. We have file integrity monitoring, configuration management, all that, so we can look at your cloud assets and provide the same level of service as we do for the on-prem assets. So it's part of the product evolution. So we've already planned for it, and we're delivering it.
Thank you. Does anybody in the room have a question that they wanted to ask whilst we've got all these great gentlemen up here? Does anyone have some burning issue from the points that have been raised to date? I have a couple more questions, but I'm just wondering if anybody wants to put their hand up and ask something.
Can I ask a question of you guys, actually? I can turn the table somewhat, but I'm interested, I don't want to labour the point about MITRE ATT&CK, but I'm curious, who's familiar with that framework here and who's potentially using it in their environments at the moment? Any hands up? Okay, I've got a one. Okay. So not broadly yet, it appears, but I will say that it's certainly a framework that I think attention should be paid to currently. It's a very effective format for understanding your strategy around protecting your environment. I'll use the analogy that it sort of helps you understand what you should be protecting yourself against. But I'm in Wellington, I'm worried about earthquakes. So but when I'm in Sydney, I'm worried about bushfires. It's making sure you're tackling the right threats first.
Actually, it brings up a good point. One thing the security industry is really good at, and we should all celebrate, is we share. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we all have a common goal. Everybody in this room has one common goal about securing data and keeping their environment safe. If you take that a different layer, if you come back and find, different companies have different sharing agreements. They'll share threats and they'll share data and feeds and all sorts of things. So it's actually a very nice environment as a vendor to see that type of sharing going on.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, if you take the MITRE ATT&CK framework and you combine the CIS policies with it, that really provides a very nice hardening process for your system.
Obviously, we've talked about, from my perspective, getting to 2020 was quite a big sort of change. I think we're into the second decade of the 21st century. Some of the kind of issues, I was having a conversation with a chap outside previously. We see the same stuff, the same root causes of many breaches. The failure to maybe start at the bottom of the CIS control catalogue and implement, asset management, inventorying, and then, going upwards from there. If we're failing at the cyber hygiene stuff, are there recommendations that you guys would, see in terms of start here and then go forward? Are there your three top tips? What would they be in terms of how to, better secure the enterprise and see that detection, happen?
Two-factor everything.
Yeah. Anyone want to vote for two-factor everything?
Process integrity.
Process backup. Yeah. Do you want to expand a bit on that?
So one thing we at Tripwire believe that the human element is critical. Whether intentional or unintentional, you are liable to make a mistake at some point. So if you have well-defined cyber hygiene processes and policies, it's important to maintain them. So training, make sure there's fines associated with that from the company standpoint. So we preach that all the time, that process integrity is very important. It's not just technology failure that leads to breach, there's also people failure that leads to breach.
So my top tips are, start with the basics, but don't forget to start. So often we're talking to organizations, you're worried about the next step, the challenge is evolving, I don't want to make a start, I don't want to put that stake in the ground, if you like. And the reality is, you have to start somewhere. It's always going to be evolving. It's always going to be changing. But don't let that stop you, getting started in the first place.
I just quickly got to say, one of the biggest lessons I've learned through the years of security in terms of trying to change people's behavior and the way that people work is that you can't change people's behavior and the way they want to work. You have to fit yourself around the way people need to do their job, right? Early on in my security career, I was very much one of those police mentality, like don't do this, don't do that, forcing people to act a certain way. But people will just bypass that, right? So instead of, one of the things I remember from a long time ago was around phishing training, right? Don't click on links, don't answer emails from unknown sources, but then that's how everyone works, right? You have to click on links, you have to do these things. So as a security professional, my team's job is to protect the people so they can do their jobs. So when someone does click on a phishing link, it's not a user failure, it's my failure. And so that's why I glibly talked about two-factor, because for me, it's a very easy, low-cost option to enable some very basic protection around people. And to be honest, most of the people in my company that don't work from home or don't travel will never, ever see the two-factor prompt. If they do, there's something going wrong, right? But they found that comforting to know that there's a layer of protection they don't have to worry about, but my team is constantly on the lookout for.
That's great. Thank you.
I just want to add, we, Tripwire as a company, also provides its employees a lot of training. On the point of phishing, so we have our IT department launch phishing attacks as simulations. And we as employees have only 2 strikes. So if we do that 3rd time, it gets escalated as a disciplinary action against an employee. So it's difficult to modify behavior, but I think you can put in certain parameters to have people start thinking about it. I wouldn't just give up saying people will not change and therefore I will not do anything, but I would try to implement certain processes that would make you think. So I think behavior modification is important. We are no longer air-gapped. I mean, people still think we're air-gapped, but we're no longer air-gapped.
We have
That's a
something
behavior
similar.
modification.
It's just not. It's more carrot less stick. So we've gamified the reporting of emails that's suspicious that have gone through the mail filter, which shouldn't have gone through the mail filter. But when people report it, they go on a little leaderboard where they've reported either real phishing emails or even the simulations that we run. And there is a little prize at the end of every quarter for the person who's done the best. And being a New Zealand company, we send out chocolate fish to our global offices, which nicely links into the subject matter. But I do find that that kind of positive reward behaviour for people is something that people do respond to.
Glenn, anything from you in terms of?
Yeah, I think from an extra point of view, having the thing that I absolutely love being at Xrop is that we're a completely agentless passive solution. So, a tool that basically can go out and run an assessment from a security hygiene point of view and provide that real-time insights into what's going on within the environment. So.
Well, I'd just like to add that Verizon in the US do, at the end of each year, they do this really great data breach report, and it's actually kind of a Bible, I think, to a lot of the people in the industry. If you look at the recent report, I can't remember whether they could term it 2019 or 2020, but if you look at the most recent one, the propensity to click on a phishing email is going down. Yeah. If you look at the test scenarios, it went down from 4% to 3%. In the last 12 months. So I'm just saying, user behaviour can be changed. I think the awareness is getting better.
Yeah.
I think there are still some significant challenges in there. There was a story recently about deepfake audio in Europe, which was fascinating that somebody got scammed that way. But I'm just saying awareness training really is. Changing human behaviour is paramount to fixing the issue.
That leads me on to my very last question, conscious of the time. You mentioned deepfakes, Tony, in terms of, I think the gentleman in Germany or something ended up sending $300,000 believing it was his boss.
There was a guy in the UK. It was a guy in the UK. The energy company that his CEO was German. The malicious guys took audio of the German guy, the CEO speaking. Used AI technology to hold a deep fake audio conversation with the CFO, got a €220,000 payment to a Hungarian bank account, which he thought was a supplier. the CFO then got a second phone call. I don't know how much of this story you know, saying we accidentally reimbursed it back to the same bank account. Could you transfer it again? At which stage he thought this was unusual, and at that stage, the third phone call, he turned around and called them out and said, "You're not the actual person, but by the way, I've lost 220,000 euros. I'm in a bit of stuck here." So I think there were some growing issues. But the point was, he said in the statement afterwards, he said, it sounded like my boss. It actually sounded, melody of his voice sounded real. So this is going to become harder and harder. We all talk about AI, all the security vendors up here will talk about AI, which is really machine learning. But yeah, we'll all talk about this stuff, but the malicious guys are going to use it too. And they're going to use it far more inventively than we do, unfortunately.
Well, we've got the red flag, so I just wanted to say thank you all very much for your time. Some great questions, so thank you all very much.